Yes, it is time to discuss the Houthis of Yemen, a very important member of the axis of resistance and a huge contributor, to the Iranian resistance against America and Israel. The first thing you need to know about the Houthis is that Houthi is not the official name. Houthi is not what they call themselves. Houthi, what they call themselves is the Ansarullah. Ansarullah. And the meaning of that from Arabic to English is friends of Allah. That is one. Two is that you need to understand, if you want to understand the Ansarullah, the Houthis, you need to understand a little bit of geography of the Yemeni ecosystem. You see, Yemen as a country is split into two. Northern Yemen, headquarters Sana'a, is what the Houthis, is what they control. The Houthis are Zaydi Shias. They are Zaydi Shias, and because of that, it is the Zaydi Shia majority and the other Sunnis and folks of other Islamist leanings, minorities, who ally with the ideology, anti-imperialist, anti-America, anti-Israel, that come together to live conquered and essentially are in charge of northern, Yemen. Southern Yemen, that is where the folks who are allied with Israel, the folks who are allied with the UAE, with America, with Saudi Arabia, that is the part of Yemen that they control. And their own capital is Aden, Aden, Aden. However, just before the war, a crisis happened between the UAE supporters, in southern Israel, and the the Saudi Arabia supporters in southern Israel. However, again, just before the war, the Saudi Arabia supporters in Yemen, actually vanquished and conquered the UAE supporters, so that you understand what is happening on that end. Now, on the northern end, we have the Houthis, the Ansarullah. They have been a massive fighting force against Israel, particularly since the days of the Al-Aqsa flood that started October 7, 2023. They have sent drones, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles to Israel. Beyond that, they have also assisted massively to put pressure, to put economic pressure on Israel and its Western allies, including America and Europe. How? You see, like Iran controls its own strait around it, the Strait of Hormuz, the Houthis also happen, by dint of luck of geography, to control yet another strait. That strait is called Bab el Mandeb, and it curves around the coast of Yemen, where the Houthis actually, where they live and where they subsist. Because of that, during the Gaza war, during the Al Aqsa flood, the Houthis actually succeeded in blockading the Bab el Mandeb Strait from American, Israeli, and European ships. Again, they fought brutally for control of that strait, and eventually the Houthis prevailed. How? Israel will send fighter jets to attack them, kill some of the top leaders and all. But the major military activity that happened back then was that America sent one of its biggest aircraft carriers. It was called the Harry Truman, and its supporting destroyers and frigates to go and fight the Houthis. That battle lasted for 3 months, and eventually the Houthis prevailed. How? They shot down 3 American fighter jets. That is number one. Number two, they took massive shots at the Harry Truman aircraft carrier so badly that it sustained massive damage and it almost sank. And after 3 months, again, Trump immediately did a unilateral ceasefire and abandoned the Israelis in the hands of the Houthis. And the aircraft carrier, the Harry Truman, ran away back to port in the U.S. for repairs, and it has remained in the port, in the military port in the U.S. today, still undergoing repairs, almost 2 years to that incident and that attack. That is how powerful, that is how vociferous, and that is how virile a military force the Houthis are. The Houthis also have a very congruent and a very aggregated and united society when it comes to the support for Iran and the other members of the Axis of Resistance and Palestinians, and when it comes to the antagonism of America, Israel, and the European allies. So much so that when the Houthis do their traditional rallies on Friday to support Palestine and to support Iran, usually after Friday prayers, they usually number in the millions, sometimes each and every citizens that came to rally, bringing their own personal weapons in terms of rifles and guns. That is how virile the Houthis are. Now, I must also let you know that you see, the Strait of Hormuz that Iran blocked controls 20% of oil, gas, and other critical, infrastructure that support the global economy and that supports inadvertently the American petrodollar that it uses as a tool to control the world via sanctions and tariffs. The Bab el Mandeb Strait also happens to control 12% of the same thing in terms of maritime traffic, in terms of oil and gas access, and in terms of access movement of critical materials that matter to the global and to the American economy. As part of this war, the Houthis have actually promised that if push comes to shove, they are going to block the Bab el Mandeb Strait too. So instead of America dealing with just 20% loss of capacity, they may now be dealing with 32% loss of capacity, making things by far worse, simply by dint of the fact that the Houthis have joined the war on the side of Iran, on the side of the Allies of Resistance, and on the side of Palestine. The Houthis are also making a massive difference on the ground in terms of missile and drone incursions into Israel. Remember the sandwich analogy I gave you the other time about Americans, about Iranians being one side of the slice of bread, a Hezbollah of Lebanon being the other side of the slice of bread, and Israel being the akara, so to say, or butter, whatever you want to use to make your sandwich in between. This time around, Israel is now being hemmed in, not just by one entity, the Iranians, two entities, the Iranians and Hezbollah, but now by three entities, the Iranians, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. In fact, the Houthis have damaged so much of the Israeli economy that the port infrastructure in Eilat, one of the major ports in Israel is Eilat. That port has essentially ceased functioning, and all the staff have been fired and sent home just because of the blockage of the Bab el Mandeb Strait back then. The Houthis are threatening to do it again. Finally, the Houthis, do you understand, are in a particularly strategic location that makes a lot of military economic difference, particularly for two major oil exporting countries in the Gulf, and that is Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. Let me explain. When Iran blocked the Strait of Hormuz, they were supposed to cut 20%. According to that, $20 million off the 100 million global daily barrels per day that is pushed into the global economy. However, Saudi Arabia and the UAE have alternative pipelines that land in a coast called Fujairah for the UAE guys, and a coast called Yambu for the Saudi Arabia pipeline that pipes crude oil without the need of the Strait of Hormuz. Call it an alternative, a backup plan. Problem is that those pipelines cannot carry as much as the VLCCs and massive oil and gas tankers can carry from the Strait of Hormuz. But at least they can do maximum 5, 6, full capacity, maximum capacity 7 million barrels per day, compared to the 20 million barrels per day that will pass through the Strait of Hormuz. Unfortunately, Jambu of Saudi Arabia, alternative, exit port. Fujairah of the UAE, alternative exit port, for the UAE guys. Both of them are clearly and conveniently within the missile and drone range of the Houthis. So essentially, the Houthis also gets to distract, also get to stop, also get to to freeze and destroy the alternative backup oil exit access of both Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Not minding the fact that even Iran, with its drones, with its Shaheeds and Hadids and Atesh drones, actually is also within long range, as a long range, so to say. Jambu and Fujairah are also within the range of Iranian drones and missiles. It's a catch-22. And the Houthis are clearly bringing massive capacity to the table since they joined the war on March 28th, exactly after 1 month the war started back then in Iran. Thank you for joining us. Remember to like, to comment, to share, to ask your questions, to subscribe. We will gladly answer what needs to be answered. Thank you very much. See you in the next video.